Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced, and welcome to another episode of Alex Merced Says Stuff. And today what I want to talk about is blockchain. Wanted just to talk about the politics of blockchain and sort of the implications of blockchain. So you might have heard of Bitcoin, you might be kind of familiar with blockchain technology, and if you don't already, you should subscribe to my other podcast where that's all I talk about, the Bitcoin Blockchain Crypto podcast. But today I want to just talk more about it to a broader audience. So basically, what is blockchain? Again, blockchain, the whole idea behind blockchain is just being able to create a distributive ledger. Now, if you're not sure what a ledger is just a list of transactions. It's basically what accountants use to keep track of every money in, money out, assets in, assets out, etc. And generally, you'd have to have one central copy of the ledger. And then you had computers. So then the copy of the ledger could be digital on a computer somewhere. But then, that central file would have to be edited with all the transactions. And if someone had access to that file, they could change those transactions. So how can you create a public ledger that everyone can see and make it where people can't manipulate it? And that's sort of where blockchain becomes really interesting. Because what it does, it allows a copy of that ledger to be publicly available by many people, but no one person can edit it. So you could actually have a list of assets, a list of money, a list of who has what that doesn't have to be maintained by one person. So, like, for example, how much money you have in your bank account is maintained by your bank. Theoretically, if your bank went out of business overnight, no one would know how much money you have in that bank account, nor would it exist. So essentially, how do you fix that problem? That's what blockchain does. So that's the cool thing. And Bitcoin's sort of the original application of this as a currency. But as time evolved, it's become even more interesting. Okay, blockchain technology has allowed things like Ethereum. Now, what Ethereum does, it allows a whole new level of what you can do with this public ledger. Picture of this public ledger not only kept track of who has how much money, but arrangements between different parties. And this is the idea of smart contracts. So you could actually program a contract, kind of like you would write a contract between you and your landlord, and that contract would keep track of itself on the blockchain, in this case, the Ethereum blockchain. And a blockchain is just a ledger. So when I say the Bitcoin blockchain versus the Ethereum blockchain, I'm just saying there's a separate ledger for Bitcoin that's publicly available, distributed across many computers. And there's a different ledger, a different blockchain for Ethereum, a different list of transactions across many computers. It's publicly available. But with smart contracts, you can do a couple different things. One, you can create those arrangements, but then you can create units of account for those arrangements. So people do what's called an ICO, an initial coin offering, and they raise money this way. So the way that generally works is that if you send Ethereum to a particular address on the blockchain, because there's like a digital contract, a digital smart contract that's built into Ethereum, and they pay to trigger this contract, anyone who contributes to this contract within so many days, at the end of that time period, a token, a digital marker on the Ethereum ledger will be made, and now you have these tokens. So now you have sort of an alternative currency, an alternative token that you can send back and forth on the Ethereum blockchain. Oftentimes referred to as ERC20 tokens. Cool, right? Now this opens up a whole new way of being able to raise money. So you're not issuing stock in the company. You're not borrowing money. What you're doing is you're essentially selling tokens that represent something. Now, depending on the business model and whatnot, those tokens can represent different things. To me, tokens that represent sort of like the currency to purchase the good is sort of the most logical way of doing it. So essentially, a lot of these tokens, things like B token, other good ones are like Civic, BAT, Better Appreciation Token. What you're buying is a token that allows you, once they complete their product, once their product is finished and available, that's the coin you can use to buy their product. Now, not everybody wants to have. Now, imagine that not everyone likes the idea of having a world where you have to find a different token for everything you buy. Okay, so imagine every time you go to a different store, you have to switch out all your existing currency to a different currency. So this is why a lot of these business models do offer you the option to use more widely acceptable cryptos like the Ethereum or Bitcoin to pay for stuff on their business. But there's a transaction fee. So because basically the way the goal is to make money on the appreciation of the token. So if I issue 100 million tokens and raise $20 million to create what's called a decentralized application. This is an application that would purely run on the Ethereum blockchain or on one of these many other blockchains such as Waves, EOS, and many of these other blockchains that are kind of doing something similar. And since this software would kind of run itself, there is no business. So when you use it, you're not paying anyone. So there's got to be a way to profit off of it. The way you profit off it is usually you retain a portion of that token issuance. Okay, so basically you issue 100 million tokens, you keep 20 million, and the 80 million is out there for people to use later on once you complete your project. Now, if the project is successful and you create something pretty cool, there's going to be a demand for those tokens. So as people use those tokens on your software, you'll get those tokens back, or they'll be reissued. They'll somehow come back into existence and back into circulation, depending on how you create your software. But at the same time, driving that demand increases the value of the token. So the token will appreciate, giving the people who created the software a reward. So they're rewarded by the appreciation, which comes from the use of their platform. So if their platform is not used, there's no benefit. So what they usually do is they say, hey, if you use a token we created for this project, no transaction fees. But if you do want to use Bitcoin, if you do want to use Ethereum, well, we got to make some money. And since we're not going to make money on the appreciation of the token we created, we'll take a small transaction fee. So, you'll pay a fraction of a Bitcoin, a fraction of an Ethereum in order to use that service. And then basically people can choose how they want to pay. And then basically what's going to happen is that people will pay whatever results in them spending less money. So if the token drops in value too much, it's going to become a cheaper way to pay versus Bitcoin or Ethereum. So the value will go up as people go to buy the token. Now, if the token gets too expensive, people are going to be like, well, that's an expensive way of paying for it. So I'm going to instead use Bitcoin or Ethereum, and the token's value will go down. So essentially what it does, it kind of, having that option, having that sort of arbitrage creates sort of a peg between the alternative payment options. So there's a very logical business model there, but the reason why I went so into such detail about how that business model works is the amazing application or the amazing implication that comes from that. So that means you can create a business that runs itself because you don't need to buy servers because it runs on the blockchain. So everyone's already got computers running that software. And in that case, once it runs itself, and in the future, blockchains will also be able to host the website, to host everything. So essentially, you won't need someone to create a website. You won't need someone to host the data. It'll all be on the blockchain. So you got to do is create the application. And once it's created, the thing runs itself. So that's pretty cool. So you can create self-running businesses. And then basically the benefit of the success of that business, it's distributed to everyone who participates. Because, for example, with BToken, when BToken's like Airbnb on the blockchain, so basically if you go rent your house on BToken, on the B network, on the Beehive, you will get paid in BToken or whatever the person who's paying decides they want to pay in. Bitcoin, Ethereum, or BToken. Okay, and again, that BToken will appreciate based on different factors, based on the growth of Bitcoin and Ethereum, based on the relative price versus those things, etc. And basically, people who provide services through BToken, they get the profit. So you're distributing the profit to anyone who wants to put their stuff out there. But then the entrepreneurs, they profit without necessarily having to have this full-on management, administrative structure. It's just a self-running business, and everyone sort of profits. You distribute sort of the growth of the economy in a much more distributive way, without anyone having to force anyone to do anything. So basically, you adhere to sort of like libertarian goals, which is to not force anyone to do anything. People having to get into using these decentralized applications is up to them. It's, a choice. But at the same time, you also adhere to progressive goals, which are the idea of being able to allow more people the ability to participate in the economy. And blockchain does that. Okay, I mean, it always kind of seemed there was like a trade-off. Basically, using government to sort of force and redistribute wealth will violate the whole idea of not forcing people to do stuff. And then there was always this sort of battle between the two. But essentially, if enterprise, which I think will happen, goes more in this blockchain direction, where basically most goods, most services, generally every enterprise you think of on the internet now, every application, if it eventually becomes a blockchain designed business, okay, it becomes cheaper because, again, you don't have the overhead of the entire staff you need to run a company, and the continual operating costs just exists. And it allows the profits to be earned by everybody because, again, the people who are providing the computing power, they're being profiting off what's called mining, which is a whole different conversation. So everyone at all ends are getting paid without necessarily there having to be one central enterprise. And so you decentralize enterprise, you're decentralizing growth of the economy in a way that benefits everyone. And that's really, really cool. It kind of reminds me of the difference between sort of, Walmart, Kmart, all the big box stores versus Amazon. Okay, well, Amazon used the internet. They used their new technology, and they were able to create a similar business that offered you a similar good or service, but at a much lower cost because they were able to cut out all these layers of costs. In the future, you may have an Amazon that works on the blockchain. It may not be Amazon itself, but an Amazon-like service that's built on a blockchain. And again, right now, blockchains, I think, still don't have the capability of hosting websites. But I think EOS, which is one of the blockchain, is trying to work in that kind of service. So as these things become better, faster, more usable, you may have an Amazon service that can just run in a decentralized manner on a blockchain and be able to provide you services at a much lower cost point than Amazon. And basically, Amazon becomes antiquated and the blockchain version of it, takes over. It's possible. Pretty much every internet business you can think of could, over time, become a decentralized application, which means we all save money. The economy becomes more productive, efficient. We're using up less resources, and people are able to find goods and services much easier, which benefits everybody. And that frees up all sorts of time, labor, resources for all sorts of new things that we haven't figured out what they are yet. Okay, we'll figure those out when we get there. That's how things up. As resources get freed up, people try new things that they wouldn't have tried before, and you end up with all sorts of new ideas, new possibilities, because the incentives change. And that's an exciting future. That's why I'm excited about blockchain. Now, there are a few things that people will bring up when they're concerned about blockchain. One is the blockchain itself, the blockchain being the ledger. The way it works is that everyone who basically curates the network, anyone who acts as a node, actually has a copy of the full ledger. So if you're a Bitcoin node, or you run the original Bitcoin software, everybody's a node, which means everybody has a copy of the full Bitcoin blockchain, every single transaction that's ever happened. And that's a huge, huge file. Okay, and as this becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, it's going to become harder for people to really have a full node on their computer, which means there's going to be less nodes out there, and meaning the power over this network becomes bundled within fewer and fewer hands. Okay, and then that's sort of an issue. The whole point of this was for there to be decentralization, where many people can hold curate this network. Thus, no one can, change the rules, change who has what, manipulate the ledger at all. So that's one concern. Other concern is privacy. So as governments have become more cognizant of these things, they've begun regulating exchanges that facilitate the trading of these assets. They've begun being able to keep track and developing software to be able to track transactions on these public blockchains. Not necessarily perfectly, but so that way they can kind of tell, if they have some sort of record of what your address is, they could probably tell what coins and where that coin came from and trace back financial transactions like you would with any ledger. So to address all those different concerns, and also, do you need a new blockchain every time for every single use case? which means is there going to be enough computing power to facilitate a blockchain for every different use case of the technology? But if you have one blockchain that handles the transactions of a bajillion use cases, kind of like an Ethereum, does that file become way too big because it's handling so many different use cases at the same time? How do you reconcile that? So there's a couple projects that I think have kind of answered these questions, which is why I think they're really important blockchain projects to follow. Such as one that I really like is Lambda. They have a token out there. It's TAU, Lambda Tau. But what Lambda's doing is they're trying to basically create a framework for blockchain. So basically, imagine if creating a blockchain was as simple as just opening up a software on your computer, kind of like creating a database as simple as opening up like Microsoft Access or SQL. You just open up the software and you have a database. So that would be really, really cool. Right now, it's programming intensive, and you need high skilled people in order to create a blockchain, get it started, get it going. There's some barriers. They want to flatten that out. Basically, have software that allows you to create a blockchain when you need it. That can be public, it can be private, meaning a private blockchain means you have the only copy, or you control who has copies of the ledger, but it's still set up as a blockchain. That allows people who want to curate blockchains to choose sort of which blockchains want to be a node of, but at the same time, it allows all these different blockchains to communicate with each other. Because right now, if you're sending something across the Bitcoin ledger, that's only on the Bitcoin ledger, and that can't communicate with the Ethereum ledger. So essentially, they're just two different networks, and they can't communicate. What Lambda is going to do is people will be able to create a blockchain for anything, private or public, and they'll be able to communicate with each other. And because everything is across many blockchains, no blockchain is so huge that, computers won't be able to, different computers can decide which blockchains they want to hold, and all those blockchains can communicate with each other. So you address a couple different problems at the same time. So that's really, really, really cool. Okay. Now, when it comes to privacy, one of the first big use cases of Bitcoin was privacy, was the fact that, it wasn't as immediately traceable as it is now. Nowadays, when you go through a lot of online places to have a Bitcoin wallet, you are giving personal information. So it's much easier for authorities to know that this is your Bitcoin, or your Litecoin, or your Ethereum. So that's why other platforms such as Monero, such as Aeon, AEON, have come into existence. So Monero is sort of the big elephant in the room regarding privacy, but kind of like how Bitcoin is resource intensive, and they created Litecoin to be a less resource intensive version of Bitcoin, or a lightweight version of Bitcoin. Same thing for Aeon. Aeon is supposed to be sort of the Litecoin to Monero's Bitcoin, but they both offer you privacy in your transactions and allow people to transact privately. So that's pretty cool. So there's a lot of people trying to answer these questions. And along with Lambda, trying to kind of address that issue of being able to have many blockchains that communicate with each other, there is also the other project, Komodo. Okay, and Komodo has their own token and their own infrastructure for creating sort of interoperable blockchains. And then on top of that, there's the idea of the exchanges. So again, you have all this regulation, and all these exchanges are being regulated by the government. So there's a demand for decentralized exchanges that just basically, again, exist on a blockchain. So they run themselves, and there's no government that can really stop it. And a couple of these already exist. On the Waves blockchain, which has smart contracts, has a lot of the features and is addressing a lot of the problems that I've discussed before. On the Waves blockchain, they have a built-in decentralized exchange. On the Next or NXT blockchain, they have a decentralized exchange. Komodo is going to have a decentralized exchange. And again, this is just an exchange that's sort of built in its network. So basically, any software that allows you to access the network could theoretically allow you to make use of these exchanges, send orders. There's no there's not a separate business, a separate exchange like many of the exchanges people use now in order to go buy and sell these different assets on these blockchains. So it's a lot of really cool stuff. And I wanted to do this because I wanted you guys to kind of know about it, understand it, appreciate sort of the big implications of all this technology. So with that, that's all I wanted to say today. I'll see you guys later. You guys have a good one. Thank you very much. And if you guys have been enjoying Alex Merced Says, this podcast, please do leave a review over there on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher. Please head over to alexmerced.com. You can go straight to donate.alexmerced.com to find ways to support the show. And again, the more supportive you guys are, the easier it is for me to make the time to do these episodes, because there is opportunity cost. There's other things that I'm not doing to help pay my bills in order to maintain the several podcasts that I do and all the different projects that I do. So any support is appreciated. And also tell your friends about the podcast. That's how this podcast grows. So if you enjoyed this episode, share this episode with your friends. I know you probably have friends who don't fully understand blockchain or appreciate blockchain. So this episode can inform them and help them know what they need to know. So thank you very much. My name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com. Thank you very much.